Hey, welcome to the webinar, How to Create Your Nonprofit's Brand Book. This is Jeremy Hazelwood. We're going to get started in about 60-ish seconds. I'm going to wait for a few moments to let other folks log in. So thanks for coming in right on time, and sit tight, listen to the music. I'll be with you momentarily. Right, if you're just joining, sit tight for another moment or so. We're allowing a couple seconds here for other folks to join. So thank you for joining. I will be with you shortly, and we'll get started in about 30 seconds. All right, let's get started. Welcome to How to Create Your Nonprofit's Brand Book, what it is and why it's crucial to your marketing and fundraising. I'm Jeremy Hazelwood. I will be hosting this webinar. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule today to watch this. We have a lot of information to go over here, so we'll jump into it right now. All right, first of all, a little bit about me. I'm Jeremy Hazelwood. I've got 20 years of digital marketing experience. I'm the author of the best-selling book on Amazon called The Digital Fundraising Blueprint. It's available paperback, ebook, and also audiobook if you're interested in learning more about digital fundraising for your nonprofit. I've also led digital strategy at multiple fundraising agencies where I was responsible for helping to generate over $100 million. I can't say I did it all myself. It certainly takes a team to do that. And also I have direct experience with human services, medical research, disaster response, faith-based organizations, and animal welfare. So let's talk about this brand book. What is a brand book? We'll start there. It's a living, breathing document of your organization's brand. It captures the brand standards for your organization, saying here's what's acceptable, here's what's not acceptable. It also directs your brand's use. It helps you to make decisions, basically saying if we communicate this, does this fall in line with our brand standards? Does this color, does this photograph, does overall how we're presenting this direct mail piece fall into our brand standards? So it directs the use of your brand, and naturally it establishes your brand identity. You know, when you think of logos and fonts and colors, it starts to define really what your brand looks like. And it's also a tool for internal and external use. A lot of times when we think about a brand, we only think about the consumer side or the public side and how they view your brand. And we don't necessarily always look at it internally and why standards are also important to our organization internally. So why is a brand important? It's a guide for creative execution. If you do not have graphic design folks in your nonprofit, and a lot don't, and you have to rely on third parties, whether it's a graphic designer, an agency, a consultant, a copywriter, anybody that's involved with touching your brand or communicating on your behalf, it's a guide to the execution of that creative. And also it creates continuity in the market of your brand's perception and personality. So when you think about a brand, any brand, whether it's a nonprofit or a consumer brand, the way that you perceive that makes you feel some kind of way. So when you think of Coca-Cola or Apple, you think something that means something to you. Maybe you had a good experience with it, maybe you didn't, but you know how the logo looks, you know what the colors are, you know what the tone is, and you also know how that makes you feel. So there's a lot of different dimensions to your brand. And a brand book is also important because it helps you to establish assets for internal use. Things like email signatures and PowerPoint templates. These are all things that are important internally for the use of your brand. And it also creates elements that will result in an emotional response to your nonprofit. Again, thinking about the example I gave of a Coca-Cola and an Apple, those, for a nonprofit, as you're creating yours, you want people to feel an attachment to your brand. When they say your name, when they see your logo, you want that to touch their heart. And so the way that you communicate to them needs to fall in line with your brand standards, and that experience needs to be consistent through and through. So this is why your brand is important, and this is why a brand book is important, so that you can document what your brand is and how it is to be used, and also how it is not to be used. The first thing that we'll talk about are the different components of your brand book, and this will help you to structure how you're going to build your brand book. And with this, we look at an introduction of your brand, which sometimes is a purpose. Here's why we created our brand book. We talk about your corporate identity, the style and tone of your brand, your logo and tagline, the typography that you'll use, what colors you'll use associated with your brand. You'll talk about photography standards, other brand uses, which we'll see here later, and then establishing a brand contact. So examples that we'll look at in here, I actually dive into some real life examples of real brand books that I've looked at, and these are the organizations that I checked out, and you'll see snippets of how their brand books looked for different pieces of what we'll talk about today. And that's World Wildlife Foundation, UNICEF, American Heart Association, the Salvation Army, NAACP, ASPCA, Charity Water, and Boy Scouts of America. They all have great examples of brand books, and you'll see some of those throughout this presentation. The first thing that we want to look at, though, is corporate identity. A lot of times when you think of branding, you think logos, you think colors, maybe even fonts. But before we even get to that, you should always start with who you are as an organization. And the first thing that I think about is your vision. What is the vision of your organization? And this is a good exercise. If you've never done this before, you want to look at the vision of your organization anyways. And what is it that you stand for? And a lot of times I think about this as the view from the winner's podium. And when I think of different vision statements, especially ones that I've seen with nonprofits, it's usually a vision of how the world looks once your brand or once your nonprofit has solved what they set out to solve. As an example, Habitat for Humanity's vision mentions something about having a home for everybody, living in a world where everybody has a home. There's more to it than that, but basically it accomplishes what the organization set out to do. There's HIV organization where it's living in a world that's free of HIV. So this is what the vision is. Like, your nonprofit is established to solve a problem. So a tip that I would give you in establishing that vision statement is, how would your world look once that problem is solved? Because that's the vision that you have. That's the reason you started the nonprofit, or that's the reason that your nonprofit exists. So write that out in a sentence, why your organization exists, like the problem that you're hoping to overcome, how the world looks when that problem is overcome. And it's usually a one-sentence statement. The next piece is mission. And mission is typically the actions that you take to accomplish the vision. And within your mission statement, because it is a statement, you're going to use maybe 2 to 3 different verbs to say what you're going to do in order to accomplish your vision. And so you can look up examples of that. I actually have a blog post about it within LinkedIn and on Medium. So you can search for those, and it will show you some examples of different mission statements. The last piece are your values. And for your values, I would recommend using 3 to 5 different values that your organization stands by. And these are important for a couple reasons. Internally, it helps to establish the culture of your nonprofit. Whether you're a brand new nonprofit or you're a bigger nonprofit that's been around for ages, but you're going through a rebranding process, establishing those values helps to shift the culture within your organization. Externally, donors, community stakeholders, they can see those values and say whether or not, if they identify with those values, then they're going to want to go ahead and donate money to you, get involved with you, whether it's volunteering or something like that. So I would recommend that you not just list what your values are, but you also say what those values mean to your organization, because I often see companies and nonprofits list values, maybe integrity, honesty, and these are all great values, but when you start to list what it means to your organization, now we tap into the heart of your organization and the personality of your organization, and that's what we really want to see as a donor. What is it that you stand for, but what does it also mean to you? Because if it means the same thing to me, not just that you have integrity, but how you view it and what it means, now I might open my wallet and make a donation to you. So that's a really important piece that you don't want to skimp over. And you absolutely need to nail your vision, mission, and values to set the table for your overall brand. Here's an example of World Wildlife Foundation's values. And you can see they have code, KODE, and they list what the value is, and they also talk about what it means to them. So this is an example playing out of not just listing your values, but saying what it means to you. Knowledgeable, optimistic, determined, engaging. And within this, they define what those mean. And I'll give you a moment to read these. Okay, moving on to style and tone. The top one here is an example of the Salvation Army style and tone. Now, this is a lot to look at here, but you can see with the tone, what this does, they establish a copy tone and a visual tone. So the way that you write is one thing, but also visually, how your photography looks, that's another kind of tone. So when you're creating your brand book, you can just say, here's our overall tone. And actually UNICEF, within their brand book, they have a really interesting way that they present tone. They have 4 or 5 different characteristics, and they say what those characteristics, there's qualifiers for those characteristics. Another different way that you can describe tone in your brand book. This approach with Salvation Army, they say, here's our copy tone, and they give the characteristics: passionate, compassion, uplifting, brave, trustworthy, positive, humble. So that's the copy tone. And then in the visual tone, they talk about how the visuals will look. Underneath it, you see in smaller and blue, that is from Charity Water. So their personality, which is their style and tone, those characteristics are helpful, optimistic, honest, adventurous, generous, grateful, creative, and respectful. And their brand tone goes into what their brand tone is. Okay, so this is something that you'll want to establish because, again, your style and tone, this starts to build the personality of how you communicate on your website, in direct mail letters, and email. Because if the way that you communicate, for example, on your website is way different than how you communicate in email, then there's a problem with your branding. And I've seen this play out. I've seen an organization that's more of a stoic, reserved organization on their website, but sometimes they would send emails out that were very excited and optimistic, and it was just totally outside of what the nonprofit normally sounds like. And on the receiving end of that, it was just very strange to me, and it didn't come across as authentic. So you want to be authentic, and the way that your donors and stakeholders will view authenticity is that consistency with your brand. Think about a person. If you know a person for being the same at the water cooler, when you see them in the grocery store, at your place of religion, out at the kids' sports activities, and it's all the same, that's what you know them for. But if you know them one way in one area of life and a different way in another area of life, then you start to wonder, who is this person really? So think of your brand as the same thing. You want to be the same through and through in any environment. All right, the next thing we'll look at is logo and tagline for your brand book. And these are examples of UNICEF on the left side, Charity Water in the middle, and NAACP on the right. And if you notice on the left side with UNICEF, it shows different uses of the brand. I mean, naturally the brand elements are the same, but it shows these are the standard ways to use it. There's primary usage, secondary usage, which is really a reverse of the colors, using the white circle with the blue background. And the limited usage would come into play when there might be times where you can't use a color logo. Maybe it's a black and white type of design. And so here are the acceptable logos for that kind of way to execute your logo. The middle one with Charity Water, it shows the different elements of that. It shows the logo widths on there, and it shows different ways to use it. The little icon with the Charity Water name, just the icon by itself, and then the icon with Charity Water underneath it. So these are the acceptable uses of the brand. And below it, you show, or you get to see how they create different space within the logos. Now, most organizations will use a similar method to show the spacing with the logo. Is this necessary? Like, it is necessary, yes, but if you have nothing right now and it'll be a little bit too much to put all the spacing and everything, just put logo on here. Just document your logo. You can always go back and update this. That's why I say it's a living document. This is not something that you create one time, shove it away in a computer or a drawer, and it's done with. As you update different brand elements, you want to update your brand book. On the right side, you see NAACP. They have their preferred logo, and then they have an alternate logo. And you'll see that with a lot of nonprofits. They'll have like their main one and then their secondary one, as we see here with all three of these organizations. Okay, so that's a way that you would show your logo and your tagline and call it out. Here is our primary logo, here's secondary, and if there is a limited usage, you could include that as well. Next, we'll look at typography. Your brand's typography may vary by web versus print. And that's okay. You can use different forms of typography. However, you do want to make sure that you are consistent with the kind of fonts and typography that you use. And generally what you'll want to do is just establish that within your brand book. So again, you could use a primary and a secondary one. And typically what you'll find is you'll see the letters of the alphabet and numbers that go along with it in that font as well, or other characters. So this is a really simple thing to do. Just look up different fonts and make sure that you document those fonts. And again, this sounds like a really small thing, but if a nonprofit is using 20 different fonts, it breaks the continuity of the look and feel of the nonprofit. So you want to make sure that you establish, here are the fonts that we are using. Anything outside of this is violating our brand standards. The next thing we'll look at is colors. Now we're getting into familiar things, colors. Okay, and so with colors, you'll want to identify what your main colors are. And similar to font sizes and the use of logos, oftentimes there are primary colors and there are secondary colors. On the left side, you see the Salvation Army. They have their colors over there. They also, in the middle, I believe that is ASPCA. Here are different colors that they use. On the right, we have Charity Water. And you'll notice, along with the colors, a lot of different letters and numbers underneath them. So looking at the middle, for example, you see to the right of the purple, PMS, Web Screen, CMYK, and RGB. And most brand books that you'll see will have CMYK, RGB, hex, and possibly Pantone. And these are just different color codes, if you will, for different mediums, because print requires one kind of color and web requires another kind of color. Now, if you're not a graphic designer, this just doesn't make much sense what you're looking at here. But trust me on this, you do want to document these different styles of your color, because when you do hand these over to a graphic designer, they'll 100% need to know what these colors are. So all you have to do is document it once and share it with the people who will be doing any kind of design with your logo, with your website, with your brand colors. So that's why we want to capture it all in this brand book. All right, moving on is photography. And on this, we have on the left side where you see photography and you see the pictures of the kids on the bikes. This is from the Boy Scouts of America. And they describe their photography style. And this is something that I'd recommend for you with your nonprofit. You would talk about really the style that you want to shoot. And in a sense, this should fall in line with your style and tone that you've established overall for your organization. So you want to document that, but also in addition to just documenting what that style is or giving a description of the photography, you want to provide pictures of your photography. Now, if you don't have any pictures at all, if you're a brand new nonprofit or still pretty young, or this is your first time going through this exercise, you may not have on hand photography that your organization has taken or has as part of their library, any of those pictures that fit within your standards. And if you don't, this is the only case that I would say it's okay to use stock photography. I'm usually 100% against it, but if you need this for your brand book as an example of here's how our photography should look, then use stock photography. However, once you start getting in images that you own that is really of your brand, you want to update this brand book with your images to show here's how our image and our brand looks via our photography. You'll also want to see examples of what it should not look like. For example, you want to put in here, I would imagine that you don't want to use stock photography, or the only case that you would use stock photography is X, Y, and Z, if there's 3 reasons why or whatever. So you just want to document here's what our style is and show examples also of what it is not. This particular page here really just shows what it is. It doesn't show what it is not, and I'll talk to you about that here in a moment. Other brand uses, we'll look on this. NAACP, I have examples of their national letterhead and their envelope, a memo, a press release. I would also say with other brand uses, you'll want to look at business cards. When you're creating your brand book, you'll want to have a slide that mentions your business cards and you have an example of what that business card looks like. And you'll want to make sure that you distribute the source file of the business card to whoever is responsible for designing those, because everybody in your organization should have the same exact business card with a different name, of course, but you want to make sure that that is consistent across the board. Also, think about things like if you're a chapter-based organization and you have a website template, but every chapter kind of does their own website thing, you want to establish standards and probably even a website template, whether it's WordPress or something else, and say this is the acceptable template to use. That way, a chapter in one part of the country or one part of the world doesn't look drastically different from something in another part of the world, because what that does is it hurts the overall brand. So you want to make sure if you're a chapter organization that if I look at your website in South Dakota, it should look the same as Tampa, Florida, or Paris, France, or anywhere else. It should all have that same look and feel. Does it need to be 100% the same? Not necessarily, but when I see it, it needs to reinforce the brand that I've seen everywhere else with your organization, and it should have a similar format to it. Also, another brand use is internally you want to create probably 1 to 3 different versions of PowerPoint templates that are acceptable for your organization that follow brand standards, because what this does is it helps your organization internally to be on the same page with your brand, and also it makes it a lot easier. It saves time. That way you're not having to reinvent the wheel every single time. But think about this externally too. There's times where you'll have to do presentations to external audiences, and you want to make sure that you have a template for that. And again, whether you're in one part of the country or world or another, that you're reinforcing your brand standards everywhere you go. I would also include within your brand book some don'ts, or a do's and don'ts page or pages to it that will essentially say, here's an acceptable way to use our logo or pictures, and here's a way not to do it. I just put don'ts on this page because oftentimes what you'll see in brand books is usually the don'ts involve your logo usage or the photography. It's pretty reasonable to see why that is, because these are the two most frontward or public facing pieces of your brand. The logo should be everywhere. The photography that you use is usually associated with your website or marketing communication pieces. So these are the things that have to be consistent across the board. And you can see here, the one on the left is the Boy Scouts of America photography, and this one is staged, and that's really against their brand standards. They don't want staged looking photography. They want photography in the moment. To the right of those, you see the family and the lady doing push-ups. I believe that's the American Heart Association's pictures, if I'm not mistaken. If I am, forgive me. But again, these are things that look posed. They look really like stock photography, and that's not something that they want for their brand. On the right side, you see NAACP, usage of their logo. You can see how their logo looks distorted. So it's kind of shrunken up and it's out of proportion. You also see different colors of the brand, which is against brand standards. So this is something good to include with your brand book. Here is how not to use the brand. For Charity Water, they have a watch the details, don't capitalize our name, don't remove the space after the colon, don't remove the colon, don't change the font. So a lot of different things not to do. Salvation Army on the right side, they don't want their logo against a really busy background. You can't use black and white versions or any other colored versions of the logo. So these are really good things to include with your brand, because if you don't include these, someone who has your logo may need to create a quick piece for a community event and it doesn't represent your logo correctly. So that's what you want to make sure that you avoid. And that is one of the reasons why you establish a brand book. The last page that I would include within your brand book is a brand contact. And with this, it's really simple. Who's in charge of your brand? If I have a question about a brand, that is the person that needs to be your brand contact. And you would have their name, their title, their phone number, and an email. That way, it's very clear who owns the brand, who can help you decide whether this is an appropriate use of the brand or not. And this is the person that would most likely distribute your brand book throughout your organization. Now that you have all this knowledge about your brand book, what do you do next? Well, one thing I'll talk about for a minute is Fundraisers Unite. And this is my online community that I've set up where I talk about marketing and fundraising for nonprofits. And I actually have a template in there for a brand book. This is like a screenshot of it. You can see it's pretty bare bones because, this is really a guide. It's a template. You can go in, fill out every different piece of this and add your own graphic elements, and that way you can have your own brand book. You don't have to create it from scratch because I've already done 90% of the work for you in terms of what you need on there. The things that you'll have to do are coming up with those important things like your vision, mission, and values, and your colors and logo and all that stuff. But even if you have a lot of these, this is a template that you can put all that stuff into, and you can have that documentation. A little bit about Fundraisers Unite. What I do with this is every month I do some kind of a training, kind of like what we're doing right now. I also do weekly live coaching on Facebook Live. I have an exclusive group for Fundraisers Unite. So if you join, you have access where if you have questions, like I'll answer them live every single week. You know, it's better than looking up information in a blog or trying to find an article about digital fundraising or marketing or branding. Like, you have time each week to get with me and ask questions. I call it my office hours. I also have a resource library on there with a lot of different templates, and it keeps growing each month. I add different resources to it. So what it is today is going to be drastically different from what it is 6 months, a year from now, because I continue to add templates and tip sheets and things to really to help you become a better marketer and a better fundraiser for your nonprofit. And we have an online community with a lot of different message boards. There's people all over the world right now that are in Fundraisers Unite, so we can learn from each other, share best practices. And then I have an active blog where I'm posting 3 to 4 times a month on different topics. So I've talked a lot about branding this month because that's the focus of this month. I have a special gift for you since you're a part of this webinar. If you do join Fundraisers Unite, it's only $7 a month. And for no additional cost, I'm throwing in the digital fundraising blueprint. It's normally $500 just by itself, but if you become a member of Fundraisers Unite, it's $0. You'll have 100% access to the digital fundraising blueprint and the whole community with Fundraisers Unite with all the templates and everything. The digital fundraising blueprint, it's a self-paced course, so it's available 24/7. There's over 5 hours of content. If you're curious how to raise money or even learn more about email, SEO, social media, digital media, it's all in there. And if you are CFRE, you can actually get 4.5 points for completing the digital fundraising blueprint. You can get all this for only $7 a month. You can cancel this at any time. So if you decide that you want to check out Fundraisers Unite, pay $7, download templates, and maybe you just are not with it, then that's fine. No questions asked. It's easy to cancel. But I think if you join, you're going to like what you see. And again, those resources, they pay much more dividends than that $7 a month. That's it. You can go to fundraisersunite.com for more information about that. If you have questions for me, this is a way that you can contact me. I'm on Facebook, Twitter. I have a blog on Medium. And so you can hit me up. If you want me to send you the template for this, contact me through any of these means and shoot me your email, and I will shoot the template that we just went over today. That way you can have some of those examples. And that is all. I hope that you all join Fundraisers Unite. I hope that you get a lot of information from this brand book. And I'd love to see your brand book. If you already have one done, or if you use my template from Fundraisers Unite, I'd love to see how it turns out for you. So thank you for taking time out of your schedule to check in with me here today. Good luck with your fundraising. Good luck with your marketing. And thank you for the work that you do to help make this world a better place. Have a great day.